wanted to make a couple of comments. First of all, we are brought to you by the South Carolina Green Party.
scgreenparty.org.
And I am at daisydeadhead.com.
And the show is at thedaisydeadheadshow.com.
And, yeah, we're going to talk about a few things. I did not blog about the Ann Romney thing because I just wanted to make a few statements about Ann Romney. For those of you who've been hiding under a rock for the past week and didn't know the big hoopla going on, as a feminist, I feel like I have to say something and register my opinion, so I'm going to do that. A pundit named Hillary Rosen, who writes for Salon, I think, said that, very controversially, that Ann Romney never worked a day in her life. And see, I thought this was just a given. Of course she's never worked a day in her life. Is this a question? Is there a question about this? Oh, you're saying stay-at-home mommies don't work. Well, having been a stay-at-home mommy, let me assure you, I did work. And certainly if you've raised 5 boys, you've worked. But Ann Romney has $290-odd million. And that's a quote from her husband. $290-odd million. What do you think about that, Greg? What is that odd million? What does that mean?
I think that means he's got $1 million left over that he wants to hand to me. He can't find me.
Right, okay. From all accounts, she's had nannies and maids her entire married life. That is what we were talking about, people, that is what we were talking about. Not whether mommies work, but whether rich women do anything. If they do not work, what do they do? What do they do, Greg? What do they do?
Well, it depends. Some do a tremendous amount of work. Some do a tremendous amount of volunteer work and things of that nature.
I don't think she does.
Well, I don't know. I really know almost nothing about Ann Romney.
Well, I know she doesn't work in the sense that we work. She chooses to lend her name to things and be Miss Thing and all this, and that's very nice, but that's not the same as actually working. I don't think she ever wiped up any spit or vomit in her life. I just don't. I think she had nannies. I think when you have $290 million and you're in the 1%, I think you have people doing your work for you. Her husband hired yard workers that were immigrants and apparently didn't know they were. Oh, my goodness, they are? And then he backtracks on that and says it's a contractor. Well, the contractors were hiring immigrants. Why don't you know who's why don't you know who's working on your yard? How big is your yard anyway? How many yards do you have?
Yard? There you go.
I know.
Which yard?
So last week we talked about his abuse of animals, and then now we're talking about his abuse of the immigrants, and now he's trotted out his wife to be his economic expert for women's issues. And if anybody thinks that's anything but comical and laughable, well, you can go ahead and turn this radio show off because,
it's never a good idea to encourage people to turn off their radio. Please stay tuned.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
Ann Romney is spoiled. And, yes, that's what we meant. She's one of the 1%. That's what Hillary Rosen meant. And that's what they're trying to twist and say it's the mommy wars about women staying at home versus women working. I've done both. I stayed at home and I worked. I understand that people make choices, blah, blah, blah. We all do. People homeschool, people don't. We all understand that. But let's keep our eyes on the ball. Class warfare, yes. We like class warfare at Daisy's Dead Hair and my blog and at Daisy Deadhead Show. We like class warfare, especially the 1%. And we have that not everybody can marry the 1% and stay home and have maids. So we're just wanting everybody to know that that's where that's coming from, what Hillary Rosen was saying.
Well, and as you pointed out, when you stayed home and you raised children. My wife stayed home and raised our 2 girls. She was probably able to stay home for about 6 years until Aaron was in first grade and Kathleen was able to go into the Rainbow Mountain School up in Asheville. We made a lot of sacrifices to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
We drove one car. When that one car broke down, I rode a bicycle.
Mm-hmm. And that's what most people have to do for that.
Right,
Most people who have somebody at home because they feel strongly about that, that is a very difficult decision, and it's not always women. Sometimes the man stays home for a while the woman goes and works for a while.
Absolutely. And feminism means choice.
Yes.
To me, that's the whole point. I don't care if you're rich, poor, or in the middle. If you opt to work, male or female, that's your choice. If you opt to stay home, male or female, that's your choice. But don't present yourself as an authority on something that you truly know nothing about. Because
one of the masses when you are totally removed. Right. Like Joe Biden's up there saying yesterday, who has a Swiss bank account? What? Y'all don't have a Swiss bank account? How many have over $100 million in your IRA? What? You don't? And, when you start to here for the Republican nominee, people. This is their choice. So we need to look at this person. I want to know about those nannies. I want to know about the immigration status of every one of those nannies and housekeepers and maids and yard workers and everybody else that's ever worked for Romney. If he's going to keep people out of the country and yet go ahead and employ them himself, then he's just another hypocrite Republican and another liar. And that's what I'm looking at. And I want to know about her nannies. I want to know their names. Were any of them Ortiz or anything like that? I want to know where they came from. I want to know if she was paying Social Security on all of them. I want the whole thing. They sure do get, onto Democrats and radicals about these issues. And yet nobody has touched this issue in the mass media. Nobody has touched the fact of her maids.
Oliver Fox?
Very funny. Well, remember the hoopla over the yard workers?
Right.
I assume there's, where there's smoke, there's fire. I assume there are more illegal immigrants where they came from. And I'd like to know about the nannies. And so she started talking about how hard she's worked. Really? Let's hear some more about that. And, if you're an investigative reporter out there, you could do worse than to investigate the Romney's finances.
It's really interesting. I was actually having this conversation with one of Martha's caregivers real recently. She and I were talking about my former employer, who is an exceptionally wealthy man, hundreds of millions of dollars as well.
Wow, okay. Yeah.
And he went to work with me one day because I was a salesman working for one of his companies, and he came to ride along. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool. It was really nice. He was a very nice fellow. And I asked him, I said, what does your wife do? And I expected, travel, hang out, something like this. She owned and operated a fabric store in a mall. Mm-hmm. He's worth hundreds of millions, and she's running a fabric store in a mall.
That's probably what she's always wanted to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's not like you can't, everyone has the freedom to do what they feel, if they're in a position to do something and they feel the desire, the need to do something, that's great. But once again, he would never present his wife and say she knows all about being a small business person and the risks and associated with it, because she's got the backup. She'd never, she'd never have to worry, oh my gosh, how about making payroll this week? She'd never have to worry about that.
Exactly.
He would never present her as a struggling business person.
Right, exactly.
And that's apparently the way she tried to present herself is, I'm just like any other housewife who raised 5 boys.
With nannies and maids, yeah.
Right. And I don't understand why, we elected President Roosevelt 4 times. He was a very rich man. Everyone knew they didn't know he was wheelchair bound, but everyone knew he was a very rich man. America doesn't hate rich people. Doesn't have a problem with having rich people lead the country. So I don't know why Romney feels this need. Maybe circumstances have changed in the last 60 years. But I don't know why he feels this need to be an average Joe.
Well, I think it's because of what we've done in Occupy Wall Street. We've put them on the spot,
you know what?
Greg.
You're probably right.
And all of a sudden, everybody's wondering, who are these fabled 1%? Because most of us have never even met them. Mm-hmm. I've never met them. I mean, you actually had one in your car, apparently.
I did. And he was a very nice guy.
I mean, I probably waited on them, when I was a waitress or something, but I